Hi everybody, my name is Tori and welcome to the first official video of my YouTube channel. As you can see by looking at my channel, I have made videos in the past, but most of those were over 10 years ago and the majority of them were just lyric videos to songs I really enjoyed at the time, and most of them got a copyright strike in one way or another. But now I've decided to start an official YouTube channel where I will be talking about myself, talking about things in pop culture, mostly things that I personally enjoy, which just off the top of my head include Taylor Swift, Kelsey Ballerini, Harry Potter, How to Train Your Dragon, The Hunger Games, just to name a few things. But in today's video, I thought I would introduce myself to all of you. So to start off with, I am 31. I live in a small town in Minnesota, and I have been married for almost 5 years. I was born about 11 weeks premature. I was supposed to be born in January of '94. I was born early in October of '93. At the age of 1, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, which is caused by brain damage either before, during, or after the mother gives labor. In my case, because I was born in the 90s, I'll probably never know exactly when the brain damage happened. And with cerebral palsy, it can affect different parts of your body or your entire body. For my particular case, it affects mostly everything from my waist down. Most children are walking independently between the ages of 1 and 2. I, of course, was not because of the disability. Eventually, I learned how to walk with a walker. I did not take my first independent steps until I was around 5 years old. A few months later, at around age 5.5, I had my first major surgery, which is called a rhizotomy. Don't ask me for the exact details because, again, I was about 5. I had no idea what was really going on, and I could ask my parents, but they don't really understand medical lingo, so they wouldn't really know either. All I know is that when I was walking, most people walk heel, toe, and their feet are flat. In my case, I was dragging my toes almost like this when I walked. And the rhizotomy surgery basically let my foot sit flat like it would in a normal person. That was my first surgery. I won't go into the details of every surgery I've had because in the 26 years since that first surgery, I have had 15 surgeries on everything from my back, my hips, my knees, both front, outside, and inside, my lower legs, and I don't know how many surgeries on my feet and toes. And I grew up in an even smaller town than where I live now. And I was pretty much the only kid in my school that had any kind of disability that was physical. Basically, the only other kind of disability that people had in my school were things like ADD or ADHD. Nothing that could be seen by people. And my school was very small. You literally started kindergarten, half the building was elementary school, the other half was high school, or in my case, middle school and high school. Elementary school was relatively easy, especially because most of the time at the start of the school year, I was typically in a wheelchair. So all of my friends wanted to take turns pushing me around because it was a cool thing to do. And they would offer to get me my lunch trays and stuff like that because I obviously couldn't because I was in a wheelchair and it was kind of impossible to get in the lunch line and do everything you needed to do to get your lunch. But summers were hard because almost every summer of my early childhood I was having a major surgery that would lead to going down to Minneapolis and having surgery, being in the hospital for maybe half a week or a week depending on the severity of the surgery, and then coming home and being in a wheelchair for maybe a month or two, sometimes longer. And while most kids were going to camp, having sleepovers, and doing typical summer things, I was at home in a wheelchair where the only things I could really do for fun was watch TV, read, play board games, and puzzles. And I didn't have a lot of friends visiting me. And of course, I could never go over to my friends' houses because most of my friends didn't have houses that could accommodate me in a wheelchair. So that was hard. As I got a little bit older, like almost middle school age, I kind of stopped having surgeries every single summer, or at least that's what it felt like. But middle school and high school was a whole new challenge that I thought I was ready for. I really wasn't. It pushed me to limits that I didn't think I could handle. So, in elementary school, you have one teacher in the one classroom, and the only time you leave is to go to either music class, gym class, lunch, or recess. In middle school and high school, basically middle school and high school were the same thing. You had lockers in the same area as the high school kids, and you went from each class with all the high school kids. You just went with your particular classmates in your grade. And in elementary school, my teachers were very accommodating to me being in a wheelchair or using a walker or crutches or whatever the case was at the time. They were very understanding and very accommodating to my particular situation. Middle school and high school was pretty much the exact opposite for almost every single teacher I had. I would fall down in the hallway, and 99% of the time, nobody would help me up. And then I would be late to class, and the teachers would get upset with me. And I would almost want to cry because that's not my fault. I fell down in the hallway because I'm very clumsy because of my disability. And then came the teasing. I knew I was going to get teased in high school. I did not know it was going to be this bad. I would have boys that I had crushes on pretend to like me and then literally push me down and mock me in front of everyone. And I got called every name in the book. I got called loser, grandma, cripple. Excuse my language, I did get called this one a lot. I got called retard a lot, which for me, I hate that word. No matter what context you use it in, I do not like that word. and I got told that, okay, how do I put this? That the world would be better off without me. Let's just put it that way. And by the time I got into high school, I would literally sit down with my group of friends, and they would all be having conversations, and I would try and get involved in their conversations or start a conversation with someone. I would be completely ignored. So eventually, I would just eat at a table or a section of the table by myself. And then it got even worse, and it eventually got so bad that I would just eat my lunch in the hallway while listening to my iPod because I just wanted to shut out the world. And this brings me to why I love the things I love so much. As a preteen and an early teenager, Disney Channel was my lifeline. Those characters were sometimes the only friends I had. I was obsessed with Hannah Montana, High School Musical, Wizards of Waverly Place, the Sweet Life series, Camp Rock, the Jonas Brothers, Demi Lovato, Selena Gomez. Like, pretty much if they were a popular character or singer or it was a popular show in the late 2000s to the early 2010s, I was a fan. And that'd be the thing I'd look forward to when I would get home from school. It'd be like, new show, new episode, new music video, new something from the Disney Channel or Disney bubble. And I got teased mercilessly for that. I can't even think of any friends other than one who ever liked the same stuff I did when I was in high school. And then I found Glee. Now, looking back, the songs on Glee are amazing. The performances are, they slap. But the show itself and its storylines are very cringy. But at the time when it was actively airing on TV, I was a Gleek, as it was called. And that show made me feel like it was okay to be myself. It was okay to be an outsider. It was okay to be different. And I thought, okay, I'm gonna find friends who like the same things I do, eventually. And outside of the one really close friend I had in high school and one friend that I made in college, I've never really found, at least not a female friend, who's into the same stuff that I am. So I'm still trying to find that even at 31. And then I knew about Taylor Swift in her early years, but because her first album came out in 2006, when I was in, I think, 7th grade, I was more in the Disney scene at the time. I did grow up listening to country radio, but by that time I kind of transitioned to more Disney pop. But I did know a couple of her songs from her debut album. But then Love Story came out in 2008, and that has literally changed the course of my life. That song came out and I was hooked. And then Fearless, the album, came out right after I turned 15. And when I heard the song 15, I was like, oh my goodness, what is this song? And then I had my first real relationship at 15. And he broke up with me. And then I really listened to 15. And I just went, she is writing songs about my life, even though she doesn't know me. Like, how is she doing that? And here we are in 2025, and I am probably the biggest Swiftie in the entire area where I live, because I do not know another Swiftie that is on my level near where I live. Like, it doesn't seem like Swifties exist where I live. But anyway, yeah. So Fearless was the album that made me a certified Swiftie. And then Speak Now came out. And she wrote all of those songs by herself. And she wrote Mean. And that song got me through the last couple of years of high school. Every time somebody would make fun of me, I would just sing that line in my head, "Why you gotta be so mean?" And basically, I had one friend when I was, I believe, 15, who was a year above me. She was originally from Texas, and she had moved to my town. And she had a really hard home life, so the only time I ever got to see her was on the bus ride to school, at school, and on the bus ride home. I never got to see her outside of school situations. And then one day, she left to go back to Texas, supposedly for a funeral for a family member. And I was there the day she left because her younger brother was in my grade. Of course, I figured they're going to be coming back. And about a week passed by. I got a phone call from her, and she said, "I'm not coming back." And this girl and I, even though we were a year apart, we didn't really have any classes together, we never got to hang out outside of school, we considered each other soul sisters. Like, she was the best friend I'd ever had up to that point. We liked pretty much all the same stuff. And so when I lost her after she moved away, I just broke. And then that's when I don't know how to put this, the hurting started. And a lot of my classmates thought I was doing stuff for attention. But what I realize now is that that was the start of my depression and my anxiety. And I'm handling it a lot better now than I did back then. And I never even saw a doctor when I was in high school for these problems, even though I probably should have. So if you are struggling, see somebody, talk to somebody, get help. Because as somebody who went almost 5 years without getting help, if you don't get some kind of support or help, it will not end well for you or the people in your life. So somehow I managed to get through that wave of her leaving. And then that's when I met my first boyfriend. And then we broke up. And then we got back together again. And then we broke up. And oddly enough, now him and I are actually decent friends. Where I'm not friends with any of my other exes. But it's not the kind of situation where I think, oh, we might get together again someday or something. Like, our personalities are way too different that that'll never happen. But it's nice to know that I still have one friend from high school who I can talk to and who gets what it was like being in our high school when we were. So anyway, then if we fast forward to my graduation day, that's when I realized I had severe anxiety on top of pretty bad depression. So I was really nervous the morning of my graduation, so I really didn't eat much because I'd always had digestive problems. I always felt sick to my stomach if I ate too much. So I didn't eat much that morning. And then I'm sitting on the stage with my class, which was only about not even 20 kids, I don't think, if I remember correctly. And somebody's up there giving a speech. I'm sitting right next to this industrial fan, and I just feel woozy. And I can spot my mom in the audience, and she's like giving me a look. And I just put my hand on my stomach to indicate, like, I really don't feel good. And then I just kind of started blacking out while I was sitting there. And then at one point, the dean is kneeling in front of me, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I barely had the energy to shake my head no. And they got me up and they brought me backstage, and I proceeded to then pass out. So I eventually kind of came back to, and they let me go sit back with my class on stage, but rather than walk across the stage to get my diploma, they just came and gave it to me sitting in the chair. So I didn't get to have the walk across the stage, get your diploma, and all that. Mine was very unceremonious. And then my graduation party, not a lot of my friends showed up. I think maybe only one kid from my class showed up. It was mostly family and friends of my parents that had known me most of my life. And I spent most of the party in my room because I was probably severely dehydrated and very hungry, very nauseous, very tired. So again, if you're experiencing anxiety in any form, I would get help, because you do not want anxiety ruining what is supposed to be one of the biggest days of your life. And then let's fast forward to 2013. Taylor Swift was on her Red Tour. Being I live where I live, I had tried to see her on both the Fearless and Speak Now tours, which both only came to Minneapolis, Minnesota. For the Fearless tour, my parents said they didn't want to drive so many hours all the way to the cities for a concert. So I never even tried to get tickets or anything like that. And then when the Speak Now tour came, I tried to get tickets in a pre-sale, didn't get anything. My mom let me stay home from school that day, just so I could try. Didn't get anything. Then when they went on the general sale, my mom said I couldn't stay home for the general sale. So I went to school, and they had a phone in the hallway, and I believe it was at lunchtime. I called her and said, "Did you get tickets?" She said, "I tried on the computer, I tried on my cell phone, and I tried on the landline that they had at the time. Did not get tickets." So up until this point, I had never seen Taylor in concert, which had been my biggest dream. And then comes the announcement for the dates of the Red Tour. And I believe they were announced, oddly enough, after an episode of 2020, which I'll never understand that. So anyway, I'm sitting in my apartment watching this episode of 2020, and Taylor comes on and says she's making an announcement, and she says she's going on tour to tour Red, and she starts showing the dates, and I'm pretty sure Minneapolis is going to be on there. But then I see something that absolutely blows my mind. The city of Fargo, North Dakota, which is about half the distance from where I live compared to if I had to go to Minneapolis. I flipped out. I was screaming, I was crying, I was calling my parents. I said, would we be able to go to this? And they just said, if you can get tickets and you can get a hotel room, we will take you. So eventually the pre-sale finally comes up. And these tickets were sold not through Ticketmaster, thank goodness. They were sold through the venue itself. And I was shaking that day. And in that moment, typing in the pre-sale code, clicking on tickets, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I've never bought tickets to a concert myself before, but I got tickets. And not only did I get tickets, I got floor seats. And oddly enough, the day of the concert was on my dad's birthday. So, yeah, his birthday present was getting to take me to my very first Taylor Swift concert. And I don't have a lot of pictures from that day because at the time, all I had was a crappy smartphone and a digital camera, which over 10 years ago, the pictures were not that good. But I went with my best friend who lived in Fargo at the time because she was going to school there. And we get to the venue and I'm just freaking out. I see the stage for the first time, I freak out. But the moment really hit me when Taylor comes up and she's behind a curtain and she starts singing State of Grace, and I kid you not, that curtain dropped, and so did I. I literally fell to the floor, and my friend kneels down and asks me if I'm okay, and this was my response: she's right there. Like, I was just awestruck. I couldn't believe I was in the same room as someone who had gotten me through some of the hardest points of my life up until then. And I kind of don't remember a lot of the concert. I think it's like that post-concert amnesia that a lot of people experience when they go to a really amazing concert. But I do remember she got lifted through the crowd on her dancers singing 22, and then she went to the B stage, which was on the other side of the section next to where I was sitting. And as soon as she started going towards the B stage, I grabbed my friend's hand and we went running to get as close to that B stage as we could. And I swear she smiled at me at one point because the B stage lifted up and it spun, and I swear she smiled at me at one point, and I don't think I'll ever forget that moment. And then she came back to Fargo in 2015 on her 1989 tour. Now, Red Tour concert, epic, awesome, unbelievable. 1989 concert, not so great. I couldn't get on the floor seats. I got seats in the back of the floor that were elevated. And then, unfortunately, for my friend and I, that she came with me, this was a different friend. This was a friend that I made in college. The people in front of us were, I don't know if they were just being dumb or if they were drunk or what the case was, but they were just screaming and hollering, and I don't mean like screaming along to the words. They were just screaming and hollering nonsense and literally tripping and falling over each other and waving their arms in the air to the point where my friend and I could hardly see for most of the show because I'm 5'6" and my friend, she's significantly shorter than me. So I mean, it was a fun concert to see Taylor, but the experience was kind of ruined by these people that just were being ridiculous, in my opinion. And when the Taylor Swift is over party trend happened in 2016, most Swifties were expecting an album in 2016 because, as it was, Taylor always put out a new album every 2 years like clockwork. But then when this Taylor Swift is over party trend happened, she wiped everything. And I mean everything. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, everything was gone. I was very sad in that moment. I was convinced that this was her retiring from music. Thankfully, I was wrong. And when the snake video happened, I thought it was a dragon at first, I will admit. But then when I realized it was a snake, I was very confused. At first I thought maybe her account on Instagram had gotten hacked. But then when she announced her new album, Reputation, was coming out in November of 2017, I was here for it. I never left as a Swiftie. I probably never will, unless Taylor does something that I just cannot stand by, but I don't see Taylor ever doing anything like that. So she announced at the end of 2017, early 2018, the Reputation Stadium Tour, her first all-stadium tour. At first, I was sad because I knew she wouldn't be coming back to Fargo, and I knew the nearest stadium to me was like twice as long driving as it is to go to Fargo from where I live. But then, my dad, he said, if you can get tickets, your mom and I will take you. And I got VIP floor tickets. And I've never felt, well, okay, I felt it at the Eras Tour ticket thing, but at the time, I'd never felt anticipation and nervousness like that buying tickets before, because this was my first time dealing with Ticketmaster rather than like a ticket selling company that just works with that particular venue. Thankfully, I bought a lot of rep CDs and a lot of merch, and I got a lot of boost codes, and I watched all the videos I don't know how many times to get boosts, and I got the VIP floor tickets. And I still have my VIP box, which I hope to show you in a future video when I have time. But that was my very first stadium concert. Taylor is the only artist I have ever seen in a stadium. And the people at this particular stadium, US Bank Stadium, were so amazing. I got wheeled around in a wheelchair because I can't walk the, I don't know how many miles it is to get from the entrance, to go through the merch lines, to get down to the floor, and then to find your seat. These people are amazing. And when she came out, I had video of the opening, because at this time, I can't remember if I had an iPhone then, but I think both my parents at least had iPhones by this time. So they were both taking videos and pictures for me, because I can't do that because I have balance issues with my disability, so I have to hold on to brace myself when I'm standing up, so I can't hold a phone with two hands and record stuff. But oh my goodness, that tour, that concert just blew my mind. I can still feel the feeling in my chest from the drums from King of My Heart. I can still feel the flames, the heat from the flames during certain songs. And Karen, oh my goodness, when Karen popped up, I lost my mind. And then in the basket that she goes from the main stage to one of the B stages to get to, from the main stage to the B stage when she sang Delicate, I got to touch that thing because I was one of the last people to leave the floor when they were already boxing up all the stuff to move it to the next venue, and we happened to go right by the crate that the delicate cage thing was in, and I got to touch it. How many people that didn't work on this tour get to touch that? I feel like that number is very, very small. And my mom got to touch the turf of the field that the Minnesota Vikings play on. And she is a diehard Minnesota Vikings fan. So we both got to do something really cool and really unexpected at that show. And then she announced Loverfest in 2019. And I was so heartbroken because she was doing Loverfest East and Loverfest West. I was hoping she would announce the Loverfest Midwest for people who live in the middle of the country, but unfortunately she didn't. So I knew if Loverfest had happened, that would be the first Taylor concert tour that I would be missing. And then COVID. COVID messed up a lot of stuff for a lot of people. But I just want to tell you what it did in my life. In a way, I don't know how to say this, but now I didn't miss Loverfest. Let's just put it that way. That's a Taylor tour I didn't miss because it ended up getting canceled due to COVID. So, but then my husband proposed to me on New Year's Day of 2019. I wanted to get married that June because we originally met in June. But of course, my mother said, you can't plan a wedding in 6 months. So I said, okay, let's get married in June of 2020. So we started all the planning. And then, right around the time I was supposed to go pick up my wedding dress, COVID hit this country. And what we had planned was a smallish ceremony at our local church and a big party at an arena in this town. And that all ended up getting canceled. We were only able to have about a dozen people in the church during the actual ceremony. Thankfully, we were able to live stream it, so anybody who couldn't actually be there could still see the wedding rather than just seeing pictures of the wedding or hearing about the wedding from someone who was there. So I'm grateful for that. But then, instead of having a big lavish party with all these people, we ended up cramming probably around 20 people into my parents' house because, again, this wasn't what we had planned. And then rather than getting catering, we just had to go to the restaurant that was going to cater, and we had to just eat out of to-go boxes. So that was interesting. And then it rained that day, so we couldn't even sit outside and enjoy the nice weather that is typical of Minnesota in June. So we didn't get to have any dances, we didn't get to have the big party, we didn't get the fancy food on the fancy plates. So we just ended up opening our wedding gifts in my parents' living room, eating the cake that thankfully my mother-in-law and grandmother-in-law made rather than having to go to a company and have them make it, because I think if that would have been the case, I don't think we would have had a wedding cake because of COVID. And so that's my experience with COVID. Now going back to Taylor, I was not prepared for folklore. That came out of left field. I was literally just laying in bed the morning that she announced it. I woke up around, 9 o'clock in the morning, 9:30, And I just picked up my phone and I saw that she had posted, and I didn't think anything of it. And then I saw the announcement and I flew out of bed. I was just shocked. I'm like, Taylor's putting out a new album in like 24 hours? Like, we're getting like one single, one music video, and like that'll probably be it. Like, what are these songs? Like, we've been in lockdown for like 6+ months at this point. I literally stayed up all night once the album dropped, and I've listened to the whole thing. And I just loved it. I was surprised that it was more of a folksy album than like lover pop, but I still love it. And then Evermore. Somehow that was even more of a surprise. And I love Evermore. That I literally took a picture with my hair braided, just like Taylor's, in a shirt that is similar to the jacket she's wearing on the Evermore album cover. And then it was like, okay, it's still 2020. And like, she can't tour these albums because of COVID. And it was like, how do you make these songs even work on a live stage? And then the re-recordings. We got Fearless first, which that's the album that made me a Swiftie. So my heart was so happy. And the vault tracks. I love these vault tracks. Don't get me wrong, I love hearing the re-recorded versions of original songs, but like to get these vault tracks that never would have seen the light of day probably without this re-recording project just blows my mind. And I pretty much every time she would put out a re-recorded album, that would be the only thing I would listen to until she announced the next re-recorded album. And then we got All Too Well, the 10-minute version. We as Swifties have been clamoring for this since 2012, 2013, whenever she gave that interview saying there was a 10-minute version of it out there somewhere. We have been hounding her for over a decade for that, or almost a decade for that song. And then not only do we get the full 10-minute song, we got a short film. And I watched that thing so many times. I've watched the performance on SNL I don't know how many times. And I love it. And then we got Midnights. I love Midnights. And I love Midnights. It's such a classic Taylor pop album. And then the Eras tour announcement. Oh my goodness. I think I lost my mind when she announced she was going back on tour. And then when I saw she was coming to Minneapolis, I lost it again. And I got in the pre-sale, and the tickets were really expensive, and I had to fight tooth and nail to get somebody to take me. And I had to say, this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. She's doing an Eras tour. She has never done an Eras tour. She has always done a Fearless, Speak Now, Red, 1989, Reputation, what would have been Lover Fest. She's always done a tour based on the album she just put out. This is unprecedented for her to do an Eras tour doing all of the albums. Thankfully, I was able to go, and I survived the Great War of Ticketmaster. I got on Ticketmaster as soon as I was able to for the pre-sale. I kid you not, I sat on my laptop for approximately 8 straight hours in the queue. I would get in the queue, It would get me in to buy tickets. I would click on the seats I would want. I would click add to cart. I would go to checkout, and then it would say somebody had bought those tickets already. So then I would have to go back to the beginning of the queue and do the process all over again. That happened, I don't know how many times, and then a lot of the times I would get error messages and I would have to start over. But after 8 hours, I won the war. I got the tickets. And I got VIP on top of that with all the cool stuff. Like the posters, the postcards, the lanyard, early access compared to regular ticket holders. And this tour is unlike anything I will probably ever experience in my life again. And it was, I'm wearing one of the shirts. Can't really tell, but this is the original Eras Tour shirt before she added the Tortured Poets Department set in 2024. But seeing all of those songs that I thought I would never see live, especially Fearless and Speak Now songs, was just amazing. And then on my night, she sang Dear John in its entirety. And I just could not believe it. Because other than on the Speak Now tour, she hadn't sang that song in over a decade, I don't think. And yeah, she did sing Dear John later in the tour, but she usually mashed it up with another song, so those people didn't get to see Dear John in its entirety, unlike the people at my particular show. So that was amazing. And just thank you, Taylor. Thank you for the magic that was the Eras Tour. And then we got the Tortured Poets Department. And oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I don't even know how to explain my love for that album. I have the jewelry, I have shirts. I wanted to buy all the merch. If I had unlimited cash, I would just buy all the merch. I would. And I don't know. My favorite song from TTPD probably has to be Down Bad. I don't know why that song just scratches an itch in my brain, but it's just, that was like the one song that I was like, I need this to be a single. It probably never will be, but in my mind it should be. And now we just recently got the news that she is getting back. She just got back her first 6 albums, her masters, from what was Big Machine Label Group. So we've gotten Fearless, Red, Speak Now, and 1989 all re-recorded. We have all been clowning for Reputation Taylor's version for years. And now we know that she's recorded less than a quarter of it. And that we probably won't be getting Rep TV in its entirety. We will probably only be getting the vault tracks and maybe a few songs from the original album. But we are probably going to get debut TV at some point in the future, because she says if the fans, you guys, are up to it, she'd be willing to do it. And I don't know who wouldn't want that. If we know it exists and it's done, why would we not want that? But Taylor's music has been there for me since I was about 15, and I'm 31 now, so she's been a part of my life for more than half my life. And my room is covered in posters. I have every signed album that she's released since Lover. And my question where are Speak Now and 1989 TV signed CDs? If she knew she was releasing it, could she have not signed these before she went on the Eras Tour or during a break of the Eras Tour? Like, I just want to know the logistics of why we got signed CDs for Fearless and Red, but not 1989 and Speak Now. Like, I just want to understand what's happening there. Like, are they coming eventually, or are we just gonna have a gap in signed CDs? Because we got Tortured Poets Department signed CDs, and that came out after these last two Taylor's versions. But that's just a bit of my story. Mostly how Taylor is a big part of my life, and my biggest bucket list dream is to eventually, hopefully, meet her in person one day. Whether it's backstage at a show, after a show, before a show, at a special event, at a secret session if she ever does those again, which I don't think she will, but that would be great if she did, because I don't know her personally and she doesn't know me, but for a lot of my life, she's been the only friend I've had. She was the only friend I really had after my high school best friend left. She was pretty much the only friend I had after my college best friend moved away. And, you know, most people my age, we have gal pals that we hang out with, go shopping with, go out to eat, get a cup of coffee, stuff like that, and you can just sit there and talk about your interests and share things. I don't really have that. My best friend that's a woman is my mom, which, don't get me wrong, I love my mom, but there's that generational gap. You know, I want a friend who is similar in age, grew up, you know, in the same time period, and gets the time that we're in and the time that we grew up in, and has similar interests to me. And I just haven't found that yet. But I will probably do other videos in the future talking about my interest in other topics, but I think I decided to just stick to Taylor in today's video because she's the main reason I've wanted to do a YouTube channel for many years, but I just haven't had the time, the energy, or the proper equipment to do so. But if you want me to talk about topics outside of Taylor, just leave a comment and I might do a video on it in the future. Anyway, I'm Taylor. Oh wait, sorry. I'm Tori, talking about Taylor. Thanks for watching. Bye.